This Frankenstein little camera is kind of making me regret switching to Sony. Let's talk about it. One last little thing before we get into like the design and build quality. I have not purchased this camera with my own money, and I have also not borrowed it from Panasonic. I'm so excited to announce, I guess, that my channel, myself, have partnered with Roberts Camera. This is one of the best camera stores in the United States. It's in Indianapolis, which is close to where I live, and they're working with me now, loaning me gear to hopefully take out as much bias as possible from my videos, because this means I can rely less on the big tech brands to loan me review units and give me limited time with all this stuff. Thank you, Roberts. I'm so excited. Shout out to Meredith and Josh. Now we can actually get into the details. Okay, so the body, the build design, it is rugged, it is high quality, and it is bigger than you would expect from a Micro Four Thirds camera, genuinely comparable to Lumix full frame cameras in terms of size, which is okay with me because I don't like puny cameras for video production. I want a little bit of girth to it so I can grip that thing. That was probably misinterpreted, sorry. This top dial here, which is where I usually have shutter speed, feels like it should be farther forward, like down here, because it's kind of weird to cock my finger back like this, but nice cock. And praise the Lord, we have a nipple selector on this camera. When the GH7 also has a really cool new lock button that you can customize to lock whatever settings you want when the lock is enabled. So for me, I have this goofy little front record button here.
This record button keeps getting in the way, by the way. The front record button on the camera, it's super annoying.
So when I have this dial locked, it disables this button so I can't use it, which is
A-okay with me, partner.
We're gonna get really nerdy in this section, so just prepare yourself. But this is a 25 megapixel Micro Four Thirds backside illuminated sensor. And no, it does not have dual native ISO, but it has a little trick up its sleeve, which is a dual circuitry magic that's happening. Basically, the sensor is having two signals at once. One is capturing shadows and one is capturing highlights. Basically, the goal is to get the cleanest image possible when it smashes it together in the final image. And the final images from this camera are actually very clean, not perfect though. The native ISO in Vlog is 500 and in standard color profiles it's 100. But the biggest setback in this sensor is the dynamic range from my experience. So this could be due to the fact that it's Micro Four Thirds. I don't know exactly how the science works, but here's a couple things to know when shooting with the GH7 and dealing with the DR struggles. First of all, don't go below the native ISO in Vlog if you can help it. Shooting below 500 will automatically decrease the dynamic range because you're not using the native ISO. And if you're shooting in a really high dynamic range setting and it's run and gun where you don't have lights, you can try to shoot to protect your highlights, but because of the limited dynamic range, those highlights just disappear on this camera. It just kind of crushes the shadows. So you're gonna have to either try to get that back in DaVinci Resolve or just take those highlights and blow them, brother. And if you want really good results in one click, I'm dropping Mayfam 3. It's my third Lumix Vlog LUT, now available for patrons for free. So join the Patreon now, or you can cop it on the shop. Links to my website below. A lot of you guys snagged Mayfilm 1 and 2 Vlog LUTs. There's those available and this new one that's a little bit punchier with skin tones and stuff like that, so check them out. Now also with the sensor in the image, depth of field is not just limited to full frame. All the images you're gonna see in this video from the GH7 have no speed boosting going on. I am using a Metabones, but this is just a plain old EF to Micro Four Thirds adapter. There's no glass in here, as you can see. And obviously, I'm rocking the legendary Sigma 18-35. This lens is not underrated. It's one of the GOATs. Now, in my opinion, I think the images coming straight from this lens onto this Micro Four Thirds sensor look great. There's plenty of depth of field. I actually shot a little commercial production for the Tony Stewart Speedway here in Indiana, but let's see what you guys think. I actually ran an Instagram poll posting 4 frames from this lens and this camera setup, and then I let people decide, is this shot on Micro Four Thirds, APS-C, or full frame? Half of the voters thought it was Micro Four Thirds. I thought I was gonna trick a lot more people into thinking it was full frame. 43% of everybody thought it was APS-C. So maybe that doesn't settle the debate, but it's kind of fun just to see like what people think. And the fact that you can just get images like that out of this camera with not that much effort, a little bit of lighting, is just sick in my opinion. Now, last few details on the build of this camera and the usability. First of all, there's 2 card slots. One is a CF Express, but there's also an SD card slot as well. You get a full-size HDMI, praise God. You get a USB-C with power delivery, not webcam compatible. Lumix still hasn't figured that out. Headphone jack, mic jack, and a hot shoe that's compatible with the Lumix audio recorder. And when you use this little top audio recorder, it gives you access to another amazing feature in this camera, which is 32-bit float recording. Look at this. On the back of the GH7, it flips, it twirls, it folds, and baby, it tilts. Now for the menus, Panasonic just has like an everlasting amount of menu options, which can be overwhelming. So just use your custom menu to dial in the ones you will go back to every single time you use the camera. And more important than that, dial in your Q menu and set it up exactly how you want so you don't really have to dive into the menus very much at all. One pro tip for the Q menu is to set up My List, which basically you just go to the list of resolutions and frame rates in the camera. There's like 400 million or something like that. And you can tap Add to My List, and this will give you just a separate list of only the ones you select. So I went through and selected only the ones I'll use, and it saves me way more time because I'm not wasting time going through the menus all the time. Time after time. For resolutions, insane. You get 5.8K up to 30p, 5.7K up to 60p, DCI 4K up to 120 frames per second with no crop, and HD up to 240 frames per second. This is like everything you would ever need to make any video ever. Now, the ISO performance, even though it's not dual native, it does have a very clean ISO range when you start at the native 500 and work your way up. Even at shots that weren't lit up to 6400-ish, I was getting pretty clean shots. It did have a little bit of noise in it, but it was very fine and wasn't a lot of color noise. It was pleasing to the point where I didn't feel like using noise reduction.
All right, so we're doing an autofocus and stabilization kind of vlog test on the GH7. It's very bright out here with the snow, so I can barely see the screen. And while we test these features, I'm gonna be talking about today's sponsor, Storyblocks, so stick around because we're also going to do autofocus and stabilization. First of all, I'm using the 12 to 35 2.8 Lumix lens. I bought this on eBay. Anyway, I'm using the 12 to 35 2.8 Lumix lens. It's amazing. This is the zoom range you get. With video, it's a really good option, and it also has internal optical stabilization. When you pair that with the GH7's amazing best-in-class IBIS, I'm assuming this looks borderline gimbal-like. Another thing I like to hold close to my chest is my Storyblocks account. Recently, I went on a trip to Norway, more on that soon. I wasn't allowed to bring a drone, but with Storyblocks, I found some really good Norway stock footage. But also with Storyblocks, you get music, sound effects, text presets, animated backgrounds, overlays, transitions. So go to this link right here. I'll also have it in the top of the description and right below the like button and a pinned comment. So thank you, Storyblocks, for sponsoring this video. Let's continue with this test. I'm so excited for you guys to see my next video. You're not ready. You're not ready. We are shooting in OpenGate 5.8K, which is 420. I'm totally cool with that. It's usually easier to edit than 422. Human face detection is turned on right now in the full zone of the sensor. So the camera is just gonna be deciding what the heck to focus on. Now, this lens is an older lens too. It's not even like a brand new lens. So if this does a good job, then I think we can safely rely on this autofocus for most things. The S5 II and 2X, after the latest firmware updates, have great autofocus now, borderline Sony style. So I'm just really pumped that they're finally caught up. Now this is just a middle zone of autofocus. No subject detect is turned on. It's just autofocus. So let's see what happens. Sometimes this is more reliable for like gimbal shots and stuff like that. It all depends on what you're shooting, and you should always test it with the lens you're gonna use on your project. Now this lens is punched all the way to 35 millimeters, and it's a center zone, but with face and eye detect turned on. So throwing it through the ringer here, hoping to get some decent results. I have no idea if this lens is gonna do a great job, but if it does, I mean, that's just another tool in the video production workhorse toolkit as well. Man, if I had this on my GH5 back in the day, it's funny, like, I get kind of like roasted in my comments sometimes for loving autofocus and using Sony cameras sometimes and stuff. But y'all like don't know my history where I was a GH4, GH5 diehard. I was like, autofocus is dumb. I don't need it. Now, obviously, I do mostly YouTube for work, but I still do freelance stuff too. And I just like having autofocus as a tool. These are all tools. You don't have to use them.
This is the perfect camera for somebody who's looking to maybe upgrade from their first real camera to their second, and they can't afford to jump into a full frame video production camera or a cinema camera yet. No, you don't get a full frame or Super 35 sensor, but do you really need it? Join the Patreon today to get your name on all my videos like these beautiful folks over here. Text me when you get home so I know you're safe. Follow me on Instagram for short and dumb stuff like this. Join the Discord for some nerdy tech friends. And remember that you are absolutely loved way more than you might even know. All right, God bless you guys, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye. That talking head was filmed in 8.1K. You'll know about it more next week.